right. Well, good morning. Welcome, Powerful Moments Encourage group this morning. We're glad you are here. So, hope you've had a good week last week. Tanya has an update on Ginger Ash's dad, so I'm going to let her give that. She's got the mic and ready to go. Is it on?
Is it on now?
Yeah.
Okay. So I got to see Ginger Ash's dad on Friday. I just happened to be over at Skyline, and he's going to have a third surgery on Monday, is my understanding. But just be in prayer for him because he's still not getting the sensation and the movement in his left foot. And so I think they're going to be making a decision about whether they're going to be able to save his foot. So, yeah, just be in prayer for him. It seems like he's pretty at peace about it, and his pastor got to visit on Friday as well. So, yeah.
Okay, good. Thank you, Tanya. Thank you. And then Debbie is back, so we're glad to have her back this morning. So, welcome back. Feeling much better, she said. So, she's healed, so that's good news. So, what else have we got this way, Mark? Well, we'll just give it a pass this on.
Along that same lines on the healing, Brother Jonas, the circulation still never recovered, so they had to remove one foot. And it's possible they got to go back next week, but it's possible he'll lose the toes on the other one and possibly the other foot. So he needs, him and Colleen need plenty of prayers. Good spirits, but just the circulation and being laid up for that long and having 4 different things attack him in the hospital just really took its toll.
My goodness. Ooh, it's terrible. And Jonas at one time was a runner, so, all right.
We have some good news, though.
Oh, great.
I was told that Jill Luffman was named Substitute of the Year for Wilson County for the high schools. Yeah, so that's...
Yeah, Sandra said she got recognized at the board meeting this past week, so fantastic. And she may show up here in a few minutes, who knows. So, Jan? Yeah. Okay, great. Oh.
Hi. Does anybody in here drive a blue SUV GMC Terrain? Go turn it off. If you want, I'll go get it and bring it to you.
All right. So Jan is selling Compassionate Hands discount cards. Well, it's really Demos's discount cards for Compassionate Hands. So, did you say through June? All through May, and they're good in June. Is that what okay, good in June. So, $10 and you get $15 of food. So, see Jan if you would like to support that ministry. So, Jan serves there 1 day, 2 days a week. How many? 1 day a week. So, we appreciate her ministry in that. Okay, anything else this morning? I'm forgetting. Any other updates? All right. We're good this morning? All right. Well, thank y'all for being here. Oh, I did tell Gail Phillips, she says she watches online sometimes, that we would say hi to Gail Phillips online. she makes it to worship a lot. But Jeff is, I think it's this week. I think that he goes. Somebody correct me. Tomorrow he goes tomorrow to determine goes to meet with the surgeon and to determine what they're going. I think they're pretty confident they're going to remove the kidney, but she told me that they weren't 100% sure, but they think they're going tomorrow to get the plan of when to do that and so forth. So, okay. All right. Anything else? Okay. All right. With that, then, who'd like to open us in prayer then this morning? All right, Ken. Thank you. Your turn. Man, thank you, Ken. All right, so we are, hopefully we'll finish a lesson today called Bullying or Sit on It. It's Genesis chapter 31, verses 22 through 55. If you need a handout for that, that's last week's handout. If you need that, Jamie's got extras there that she can share with you. And if you recall, this is a 7-act play as such that we're talking through here. And the first act as such was Laban's accusations. You remember Laban was accusing Jacob of what? Do you remember? Two basic things he was accusing him of. Jeff has them. What are they, Jeff? I thought he was...
Stealing his wife and grandchildren.
Yeah.
Stealing his items.
Yeah. Good. Yeah. Good way to put it. Jeff said stealing his wife and grandchildren, sneaking off in the middle of the night as such with them without telling Laban that Jacob was gone with them, and then someone had stole his idols. So he's accusing Jacob of both those. So Jacob then, in verses 30 through 32 of chapter 31, responds to that. He gives a rebuttal to that, and this is the first time that we really see Jacob standing up for himself or standing up for anyone else. And then this rebuttal, he stands up to what we termed Laban to be as a bully. And then in verses 33 through 35, Jacob tells Laban, just search anywhere you want to. So Laban carries out this search of the tents of the folks that were along with Jacob. And what did Jacob, do you remember what Jacob told Laban? If they find the idols, what was going to be the punishment for whoever stole them? Death. But if they found any other stolen property, what was going to be the punishment? They were going to give it back, right? So stealing the idols was a felony with the penalty being death, but stealing anything else, it was a misdemeanor, and all they had to do was give the stuff back, basically. And then we go into 36 through 42 of chapter 31, and here we see after Laban does this search and he finds nothing, that Jacob gives Laban what I termed a dressing down as such. So that's where we're picking up today, and let's read those verses again, just give us a reminder of those. Genesis 31, chapter 31, verses 36 through 42. Martha, if you would.
Then Jacob became angry and argued with Laban, and Jacob said to Laban, "What is my offense? What is my sin that you have hotly pursued me? Though you have searched through all my property, what have you found of all your household property? Set it here in front of my relatives and your relatives, so that they may decide between the two of us. For these 20 years I have been with you. Your ewes and your female goats have not miscarried, nor have I eaten the rams of your flocks. I did not even bring to you that which was torn by wild animals. I took the loss myself. You demanded it of my hand, whether stolen by day or stolen by night. This is how I was. By day the heat consumed me, and the frost by night, and my sleep fled from my eyes. For these 20 years I've been in your house. I served you 14 years for your 2 daughters, and 6 years for your flock. And you changed my wages 10 times. If the God of my father, the God of Abraham, and the fear of Isaac had not been for me, surely now you would have sent me away empty-handed. God has seen my affliction and the labor of my hands, so he rendered judgment last night.
Okay, so in Genesis 31:42, we see Jacob. He stated that if the God of my father, the God of Abraham, and the fear of Isaac had not been for me, then what would Laban have done? What does Jacob say Laban would have done? Send him away empty-handed. He was sent away, we might say, send Jacob packing as such. So then why did Jacob decide to leave Laban when he did?
God told him to.
God told him to. Genesis 31:42 tells us God told him that the time was right. He rendered judgment last night. So it sounded like that God reaffirmed Jacob's decision to leave the night before he actually had the confrontation with Laban and left. So, all right, so we're moving on. We talked about Laban's accusations, Jacob's rebuttal, the search, Laban's dressing down. Now in verses 43 through 44, we're going to talk about Laban's attempt to save face. So if you would, Martha, read those verses, 43 and 44.
Then Laban replied to Jacob, "The daughters are my daughters, the children are my grandchildren, the flocks are my flocks, and everything you see is mine. But what can I do this day to these daughters of mine or to their children to whom they have given birth? So now come, let's make a covenant, you and I, and it shall be a witness between you and me."
Okay. So with that, how did Laban respond to Jacob's dressing down, to Jacob's recollection of events as such? What was Laban's response? What's he tell Jacob? What's Laban tell Jacob? What's that? It's all his. Laban said that all this, everything that you see is mine. So Laban claimed to be the owner, basically, of all that he saw. So even though Laban had lost the upper hand as such, he wasn't going to concede such. So just as with most bullies, even though they are confronted, they're not as tough as they seem to be. So here we see Laban trying to save face by saying, "This is all mine," and we know that's not true. So secondly, Laban recognized, at least to himself, that he had lost. So to appear as the peacemaker, he proposed a covenant. So again, here Laban attempts to save face through this. So read on, Martha, if you would, verses 45 through 52.
Then Jacob took a stone and set it up as a memorial stone. And Jacob said to his relatives, "Gather stones." So they took stones and made a heap, and they ate there by the heap. Now Laban called it Jaguar Sahadatha, but Jacob called it Galeed. And Laban said, "This heap is a witness between you and me this day." Therefore it was named Galeed. And Mizpah, for he said, "May the Lord keep watch between you and me when we are absent one from the other. If you mistreat my daughters, or if you take wives besides my daughters, although no one is with us, see, God is witness between you and me." And Laban also said to Jacob, "Behold this heap, and behold the memorial stone which I have set between you and me. This heap is a witness, and the memorial stone is a witness that I will not pass by this heap to you for harm, and you will not pass by this heap and this memorial stone to me for harm."
Martha, read on through 55, please. I'm sorry.
"The God of Abraham and the God of Nahor, the God of their father, judged between us." So Jacob swore by the fear of his father Isaac. Then Jacob offered a sacrifice on the mountain and called his relatives to the meal. And they ate the meal and spent the night on the mountain. Then early in the morning Laban got up and kissed his grandchildren and his daughters and blessed them. Then Laban departed and returned to his place.
Okay, so who took the lead in establishing the covenant between Laban and Jacob?
Jacob.
Did think it's
took
Jacob?
a stone.
Laban. I think Laban proposed the covenant but it appears that Jacob maybe took the lead in establishing it. So Laban says, well, let us make this covenant, and then Jacob kind of takes over in establishing some of the parameters, I guess you would say, of the covenant. So what are the parameters or components of the establishment of the covenant and their purpose? Got a little help there. The MA is they establish what? A marker. So they put down a marker. It's a monument to commemorate the covenant. So they have a memorial marker as such. And then they pile up what? Somebody said it, I think, a heap of stones. So they have a mound there. They pile up a heap of stones. And Jacob's relatives participate in this by actually getting the stones and making the heap as such. So the marker and the mound provide a boundary in the relationship between Jacob and Laban. And then the last thing they do is, what do? They do what? They have a meal. So like any good Baptist, they have a fried chicken dinner on the grounds, right? So they have a meal to conclude their covenant as such. So we've talked about mental and physical memorials in the past, but I don't know that we've talked a lot about markers. So are markers sometimes necessary in relationships? And if so, when? Are boundaries sometimes necessary in relationships? If so, when? We see some heads nodding yes, that they're necessary. When do they become necessary? Okay, so sometimes some boundaries are established at the beginning of relationships. Okay, good, yeah, true. What did no one say? When home is too close to your next door neighbor, you need a boundary. Yeah, yeah. So
I was thinking about children, you know, you go to your room and you go to your room.
yeah.
So
And sometimes adults act like children, don't they, and require boundaries. Yeah. So the relationship has changed. Is that what you said at first, Tanya? So you need to set up boundaries at that time. So what constitutes a relationship change? What would constitute a relationship change? In a marriage, it's a divorce, so boundaries then become, yeah, that's a good example, become necessary sometimes. And that, what's that? When you have kids and when you have kids, it changes everything. So boundaries are sometimes required from past behavior to current behavior. Yeah. What else? Still looking for one. When children marry, yeah, boundaries occur.
well, when you become a Christian, you have boundaries because there are things that you give up that you don't do anymore, or you that are not acceptable.
Yeah. You have boundaries in. What else could be a boundary when you become a Christian? Friends. Yeah. Sometimes the friends you had before you become a Christian and after have to become different. So boundaries occur sometimes between believers and unbelievers. So Beth Moore said sometimes two people need God to stand between them. What do you think about this statement? Sometimes two people need God to stand between them. So Nancy says, oh, well, again, I'll let her say again. So, thank you.
I think that maybe that's what he's saying. God himself better watch between us when we're absent from each other.
Yeah.
Because when I'm not looking, if you could pass this marker, you know, I'm going to knock your block off.
Yeah, Ken's gonna add to this.
Yeah,
How
and,
good?
if you've ever been in a Christian bookstore, you've seen the mitzvah,
The what?
the mitzvah.
Oh, the mitzvah. Okay, yeah, yeah.
You know, it's on picture frames and keychains and
Yeah.
wall plaques. It said, "May the Lord keep watch between me and thee." You know,
Mm-hmm.
that's what a sweet sentiment. And what it really means is, if I see you first, I'll kill you.
Yeah. So they probably couldn't put that on the picture frames and stuff, so it wouldn't sell as well, maybe. So.
People don't know what it means.
Yeah, people don't know what it means. Yeah. So, yeah. So sometimes, yeah, there have to be relationships. Beth Moore states Jacob and Laban are an example of restoration in terms of forgiveness and goodwill, but not of togetherness. It looked like there was some degree of forgiveness there to some degree and goodwill to some degree, but they couldn't be together.
They weren't worshiping, were they?
No, I mean, the terminology there with heap, I don't know. I was gonna look and see if that appears anywhere else. I don't think it does.
Yeah, yeah. So it was just, let's get this done and go on our separate ways kind of thing, Mark's saying. Yeah, so Jacob is a believer. Laban's an unbeliever. So how does togetherness work with a believer and an unbeliever? Does it? Doesn't work out well all the time, does it? So it's two different mindsets, isn't it? Two different belief systems. So there's potential for it not to work out well. So again, there's reconcilement here, but there's separation. And it's also necessary. Is it also necessary sometimes to have separation between believers themselves? Yeah. Yeah, we see some nods. What's the situation sometimes that requires two believers to be separated? When they don't understand Mizpah, right? Ken said that's how Baptist churches grow, is that they split, so they can't get along. So, yeah.
Well, different denominations go at each other sometimes.
Yeah, believers from different denominations, different theologies. Yes. Yeah, they disagree over politics as such. Yeah. What kind of? Well, I don't know how to ask this, but sometimes I think we see the separation of believers being you have a mature believer and an immature believer. And it's hard for them to cohabitate as such, because one is much more advanced than the other. A mature believer has progressed in his relationship with Christ, where an immature believer is not there, I guess you'd say. Yeah. Yeah, Jeff says sometimes we pray for a hedge of protection, and a hedge is a separator. And sometimes we pray for I pray for a hedge of protection around different children, including our grandchildren. But when I think about that hedge, I'm thinking about it encircling those children. But sometimes that hedge is a dividing wall too. I hadn't thought about it as much that way, but yes, it's a dividing wall to keep them separated from things they don't need to be involved with. Good comment, yeah. Mark? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Still does, doesn't it, Debbie? So yeah. 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 So it requires humility on both the part of the believer and the unbeliever. Johnny, if you would, put the visual up, please. This is from Beth Moore, and on the left you kind of see two, and this I think is really believers. You see two, there's the cross, there's Christ, and you see two believers standing together as such, and togetherness, reconcilement, forgiveness, everything. So, but on the right-hand side you see two believers, but the cross is separating them. So sometimes, I think what she's saying there, sometimes even between believers, it's necessary to have separation. It's necessary to not be in full association, maybe. I just thought I've never thought of it that way, but I just thought that was a pretty neat little illustration. So how could a relationship be like the one on the right? How could we have a relationship like that? Yeah, good example. Yeah. Jamie gives a great illustration of that between Paul and Barnabas and the disagreement they had over John Mark, and that later Paul even comes to realize and see the value of John Mark and so forth. But initially, Barnabas, the great encourager as such, he sees potential from the beginning. Barnabas, probably one of my favorite folks, is that he can see he sees potential in folks, and he's the encourager as such. So, yeah, that's a great example. So I think again, Paul maybe got so focused on the mission that he overlooked the relationship. And sometimes people who are type A type personalities, I think that's easy for it to happen. We get focused on the mission, the objective, and overlook the relationships. So, great example. All right, so in Genesis 31:47, it says, now Laban called it, I thought I'd left that word out, Yager Sehadutha, maybe, so I'm not sure about that, but Jacob called it Gilead. So why did Jacob and Laban call the place by two different names? Yeah, it's really the same name, but same meaning of the name as such. But here we see, again, they're not together. Laban uses the Aramaic and Jacob uses the Hebrew, and both of them mean a heap of witness. Jacob used a word that we could pronounce, and Laban didn't. So I think that's it, Gilead. So and then in Genesis 31:49, this place, and Ken's already referred to this, is called Mizpah. Why was the covenant also called Mizpah? Ken, you probably know. What's that word mean? Hebrew? No? Watchtower. It means watchtower. So Laban said, "May the Lord keep watch between you and me when you're absent from one and the other." So similar to what Ken was saying, all those signs in the Christian bookstores don't really mean what they think they mean. It's really a putting up a guard as such, a guard tower to keep these two folks, Laban and Jacob, separated as such. So this mound of stones, this heap of stones they lay down there, becomes a boundary between Jacob and Laban, and it was an instrument to suspicion and fear, not to love and trust. So don't buy those Mizpah signs anymore, right? So now that you know what they mean, so. Yeah, you don't want to cross-stitch that on a pillow, so, yeah. So kind of a misnomer there. So Laban in Genesis 31, 51 through 52, he specifies about the marker stone and the mound of stones is what we might call the demilitarized zone between the two. So neither are to cross between the demilitarized zone to get into the other's territory as such. So the line was to do no harm to each other. All right, Martha, let's read on. We'll finish up. Read again Genesis 31, 53 through 55. 53 through 55 of Genesis 31,
3 through
please.
55. Okay. The God of Abraham and the God of Nahor, the God of their father, judged between us. So Jacob swore by the fear of his father Isaac. Then Jacob offered a sacrifice on the mountain and called his relatives to the meal, and they ate the meal and spent the night on the mountain. Then early in the morning Laban got up and kissed his grandchildren and his daughters and blessed them. Then Laban departed and returned to his place.
All right, so here we see the conclusion to this seven-act play. So we had Laban's accusation, Jacob's rebuttal, the search, then Laban's dressing down, Laban's attempt to save face, the boundaries were established. Now we see referees established. So if you have boundaries, you got to have referees. So we see referees here. So who did Laban call on to judge Jacob's and Laban's adherence to the boundary? Who does Laban list? The God of Abraham, Nahor, and God of their father. So what was the relationship between Abraham and Nahor? They were brothers. And who was the father of Abraham and Nahor? Terah. Yeah. So what's significant about Laban referencing each God? He references the God of Abraham, the God of Nahor, the God of our fathers. What's significant about that?
He's covering all the bases.
He's covering what bases is he covering? He is covering all the bases. What are the bases he's covering? Who did Nahor and Terah worship? Not the one true God, did they? They were idol worshipers. So here Laban says, I'm going, as Martha said, cover all my bases. I'm going to cover the God of Abraham, the one true God, but I'm also going to reference these other guys who worshiped idols as such, so they're gods too. So we'll have all these referees. So what did Laban do in response? What did Jacob do in response to Laban's call for judges or referees as such to maintain adherence to the boundary? What's he say?
Fear of his father.
The fear of his father, the fear of his father Isaac. Jacob responded only by swearing to the boundary by the fear of his father Isaac. Jacob did not refer to the false gods of Nahor or Terah, did he? So why did he do that? Wouldn't it have been nice and polite for Jacob to say, okay, well, the referees are the God of Abraham, the God of Nahor, and the God of our fathers? Why did he not do that? He said he did not want to recognize the other false gods. Why, Debbie? He only wanted to recognize the one true God. If he recognized the false gods, what would that be? What? Blasphemy, a sin. It would have been sin. So Jacob here does not recognize them. So because it would have been sin, even though it might be polite to ascribe power to false gods, would be, as Debbie said, blasphemy or a sin as such. So do we sometimes do things out of politeness that are sinful? Not like Jacob here who didn't, but do we sometimes? I don't want to offend somebody. Oh, hold on here. We're going.
Well, the way the world is going now with all the transgender issues and all that, you don't want to offend anybody, so you kind of, if you say something, you're going to offend them. So it's, you don't want to recognize that that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to be careful because we're online, but, it's, you don't want to say, oh, okay, you're okay in what you're doing.
Yeah.
Because that is a sinful relationship.
What we were talking about is we got to be honest and truthful, but we have to do it in love.
Yeah.
And we was talking about all the celebrities, all their kids are transitioning from one sex to the other now, and the world itself. Satan's in control and trying to get us to do exactly what we're talking about here. Just go along with it. And when we go along with it, we're supporting it, and we're basically sinning against God by doing that.
Yeah. It's hard to be bold and honest, isn't it, sometimes?
I remember when we were growing up that this saying, it doesn't matter what you believe as long as you're sincere about it. And I think a lot of people go along with it because they're sincere about it. They don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. Yeah.
You can be sincerely wrong,
That's
can't
right.
you? So. Get my exercise this morning. That's good.
What one generation will tolerate, the next generation will openly embrace.
Yeah. Good point.
I got something out of what we just read, that verse, that is different maybe from the way you're presenting it. And it's shaped because of the way my Bible reads. And I have the NAS, Alice has the ESV, and both of them have the same thing. God is capitalized.
Mm-hmm.
And so that means the way most Bibles are written, if it has a capitalized, the translators of that scripture consider it to be God Almighty, not a God. And so my first thought was when I read this, maybe God had revealed himself to Abraham's brother and his father, which there's no biblical reference for, and I found that interesting. I'm wondering what the other versions have. Do they have God capitalized? They don't. Okay, good.
Yeah. The only reference we have to Nahor is way back earlier in Genesis that he was an idol worshiper. So, I hope he changed, but we don't have anything in the Bible that specifically states that. Yeah. Yeah, that's it. So, what are some of just think about this, sometimes we give credit, as Laban did here, to these false gods, or ascribe power or position to that, to false gods. Do we ever give credit or ascribe power to false gods? Mark shaking his head. Yeah, like what? We're going to hand that over then. So.
I was just saying, in Celebrate Recovery every week, I present chips to the men and women, and I remind them that the first year you get a chip for every month that you are free from your addictions or your sins or whatever's going on in your life. And I remind them every week that that chip is not magical, and that's not a magical bean, it's not a magical chip. It's just referring to what God has done in your life this month and how he has carried you over each month from your addictions and from your sins. And it's just a reminder for them and for everybody there that it's God working, not a chip, not you or anything else in your life. It's God making these changes in your life.
As you said that, I just thought about as they collect these chips, it becomes a heap of stones. It becomes a boundary from an old life, between an old life and a new life. Yeah, good example. What about, though, sometimes do we ascribe power, authority to money or people who have money, people who have status, maybe? Sometimes even luck, right? We ascribe to luck rather than God's providence. How many times have you knocked on wood? You know what that reference is? You know where knock on wood comes from? I see some heads shaking now. Knock on wood comes from a wooden idol. You knocked on the wooden idol. So it's really a reference, I've been told, to idol worship, luck, rather than God's providence. So anyway, so for what that's worth, at completion, the truce, between Jacob and Laban. What did Jacob do in Genesis 31:54? He did two things. What did he do? Or really three things. He did three things. He offered a sacrifice, so he worshiped, was one. What else did he do? Before he offered that sacrifice, what did he do between he and Laban, Jacob and Laban? They had a meal, so that was the third one. They celebrated, so they worshiped, then they celebrated with a chicken dinner. Swore by the fear of his father. So the first thing he did, he went back and he swore by his father who he witnessed to Laban. He didn't swear by Laban's father or Abraham and Nahor's father, but he swore by his father Isaac. So he witnessed to him and said, hey, there's really only one God here, one true God, and that's my dad's God, that's Isaac's God. So he swore by him. So he did three things again. He witnessed to him, then he worshiped, and then he celebrated. So how does that figure into what we should be doing in our lives?
I think it says a lot for Isaac.
Oh, yeah.
Because he was raised that way, even though, he messed up, with Isaac, but it shows that he did have he credited his dad.
Yeah.
For raising him.
Yeah, he knew the history. Obviously, both of them knew, Laban and Jacob knew the history of Isaac and what went on with the potential sacrifice of Isaac. So anyway, the next morning, Laban says his goodbyes and he returns home. So this is the close of a difficult experience in Jacob's life. He's out of the frying pan, but we'll see in the next lesson he's going to jump right into the fire as such, or the potential, what he thinks is the fire anyway. So with that, what are the takeaways or life applications from today's lesson, really last week and today? Got to think all the way back to last Sunday. What are some takeaways? What are some applications? Okay, we couldn't spend a week and a half on this with Zip. Gotta have something. All right, while you think, let me give you some then, my takeaways. So we talked about Jacob went on the lam after deceiving his father Isaac to gain the birthright. Jacob received 20 years of God's discipline, if you think about it. So during this time, though, he grew spiritually, and eventually God guided him in his decisions. So we must do the same as Jacob. We must at times experience or receive God's discipline, and through that discipline be submitted to God's decisions, God's leadership in our lives. So God will discipline us. When we go astray, we can expect discipline, but hopefully through that discipline, we return to a closer relationship with him. So Jacob spent 20 years out of the promised land. Time out of the promised land results in trouble for him. So we, as believers, should not stray away from the promised land. The promised land for us as believers is being in the will of God. And then open dealing is preferable to scheming and deceit. Jacob left home in a wave of deceit and scheming, and then he leaves this time with Laban. He leaves again in the dark of night as such, and instead of facing up to Laban, he decides to not do that and to sneak away as such. So we are to have faith and not be fearful. So Jacob concludes his relationship with Laban by being a witness and proclaiming the fear of Isaac, the one true God. We should consummate our relationships by witnessing as well and proclaiming God in our life of Isaac. Jacob called upon God. When we face hardships in our lives, we should do the same as Jacob and call upon God to be able to face those hardships in our lives. All right, so finally, how do you see hope in this lesson? Treat strangers kindly, because you don't know, they may be an angel. That one in, oh yeah, no. Save it for next week, Nona. We're out. What's that? Write it down. Pastor Will will run us out of here. We're over a minute. Nona, I'm going to remember to call on you next week. All right. Well, thank y'all for being